Welcome inside the War Room. I'm your host, Andrew Valancourt, and we're back today for episode 43 of the Dynasty War Room podcast. On today's show, we're going to talk Week 17 starts of the week. That's right, it's championship week in fantasy football, Week 17, and hopefully you have some teams still alive for a fantasy football championship. And so we got 4 players at each position that I would like to discuss with you all. And before we do that, though, as always, make sure you are subscribed to this show on whatever platform you're currently listening to. So hit that follow button if you're on Apple or Spotify. And if you want to follow us on social media, we're on Twitter at Dynasty War Room, Facebook, same thing, and YouTube as well. We have a channel there where we post the podcast, and that is also at Dynasty War Room. So as always, we're just going to jump right into it, and we'll start with quarterbacks, per usual, and it was a pretty wild, Week 16. We had Michael Penix Jr. getting his first start in the NFL at the quarterback position. He's not on this list here today. However, Jaden Daniels, a fellow rookie who takes on Michael Penix Jr. this week, does kick off our list at quarterback. So Jaden Daniels has been outstanding, and he led Washington to a huge win against Philadelphia this week, and that was a huge both for the Commanders securing their position in the playoffs, but also to it affects the Lions and the Vikings and the race for the 1 seed. And Jalen Hurts left that game with an injury, so it was a pretty big game for the quarterback position for a number of different reasons. And unfortunately, that is just one of those things about fantasy football that is a bummer. It hurt me in a league. I have a chance still to advance in one league, but Jalen Hurts was my QB1. I was the 1 seed, had a matchup that I was favored to win, and lost Jalen Hurts in the first quarter of that game. So we'll see. We're recording this here on Monday night, right before the Monday Night Football game. So I don't know yet if I will advance. But if Josh Jacobs scores less than 13.4, I will add a 4th team that will be advanced to the championship round. As it is right now, I have 3. So hopefully we get some good results. But circling back, I know there's a bit of a tangent here to start the show off. But Jaden Daniels, big week. He's continuing his play here for Rookie of the Year. He seems like the favorite for that award, and he's got a really juicy matchup this week against Atlanta. They don't have a very good defense. This is a game that matters heavily for both teams. Atlanta needs to win this game to stay in the playoff hunt, and Washington is going to be looking to improve their seeding, and I believe they still have an outside shot at the division. So something to monitor there. But Jaden Daniels, he's kind of the more obvious start. If you have him, you should be relying on him. He got you to the postseason. He got you to the championship. Keep him in your starting lineup, and he should lead the way for you again this week. Next up, not quite a rookie, but it kind of feels like it, and that's going to be Anthony Richardson for the Colts. He's going on the road against the New York Giants, and he is somebody that has been a bit inconsistent, but we still have seen that fantasy production. This isn't somebody that's going to wow you as a passer, but he's had that rushing floor. He ran for another touchdown last week, and this is a defense that he can run all over again in New York. So if he can get the passing game going, just a little bit, he's going to have that floor. This is one of those matchups that could produce a massive game. So when you're in the championship round and you're looking in a Superflex league, for example, for a good QB2, or you're an underdog in a single quarterback league, starting somebody like Anthony Richardson can really help make up some ground if you need a big game. Now, obviously, there's some risk involved in that because if he doesn't score a rushing touchdown, the passing stats might not necessarily be there. Jonathan Taylor could, steal the show, but this past week, Jonathan Taylor was incredible. He had, almost 40 points, and Anthony Richardson was still very good for fantasy with a 20-point game. So that's why Richardson is the next quarterback on my list. Third is going to be another rookie. So 3 young players so far, 2 of them rookies, and that's going to be Bo Nix, who we had as a start of the week last week, and he had a very nice game against the Chargers. This week he gets to take on the Cincinnati Bengals, much worse defense than the Chargers, and this is a big game. I mean, this is could very well decide a playoff spot. If Denver wins this game, then they should be in, and Cincinnati needs to win this game. They've been hot as of late. Their offense is going to be putting up points. They have a bad defense, which means this is a great opportunity for Bo Nix to put up points. He's going to have to throw the ball to keep up, and he still is giving you a bit of a good rushing floor as well. So really everything you like to see. And although he's not necessarily a prolific passer, he's certainly looked good. He's been productive, and I think as a low-end QB1, I think certainly Bo Nix should be there, if not higher. I could easily see him being a top 6 or 7 QB this week, particularly if somebody like Jalen Hurts does not play. And last but not least, I'm going to go back this time with a veteran, Baker Mayfield against Carolina. That's a home game in Tampa, and he looked pretty good in the Thursday night game against Dallas, or Sunday night game, excuse me. And, that was something where he got banged up a little bit, so you got to monitor that injury, make sure he's good to go. But again, this is a big matchup. Tampa's going to need to win to keep pace in the playoff picture, and Carolina's looking pretty solid all of a sudden. Very nice win for them against Arizona. Bryce Young with probably his best game as a pro. He's taken some big steps over the past month or two, so we might finally be seeing Carolina take that next step, and that's good for for fantasy here, because that means that Baker Mayfield is going to have to continue to throw the ball and rack up some stats to keep the Bucs in the playoff picture. So there you have it. 4 quarterbacks: Jaden Daniels, Anthony Richardson, Bo Nix, and Baker Mayfield. Moving on over to the running back position, I have 4 names again, and let's start things off with Kyren Williams, LA Rams running back. He is at home against the Arizona Cardinals, who have now been eliminated from the playoffs. So this is a situation where I would expect the Rams to win this game. I would expect a positive game script. I think they're going to be running the ball. This is a big game for the Rams, of course, in terms of their playoff position and trying to win that division. So I think Kyren Williams is in line for a huge workload. It's a relatively soft run defense, and I just don't know how motivated Arizona is going to be coming into this game. They lost James Conner to a knee injury. We'll see what his status will be. We had him as a start of the week for the past 2 weeks, and he came up huge in both of those games for us. But looking like he might be missing this week, unfortunately. And I don't know what Arizona has left in the tank. That was a pretty bad loss. Although Carolina, as we mentioned, has been playing much better. You have to have that game if you're Arizona. So I'm liking the matchup for the Rams offense, particularly for Kyren Williams, who I think is in line for a big week. Next up is going to be Bucky Irving from the Tampa Bay Bucks against Carolina. And, Bucky Irving is somebody that has really kind of taken that backfield by storm. He's, in my mind, and I think most people's opinions, the, kind of the guy to have in this backfield. He's the number 1 to me over Rachaad White. And I think, we saw White lose the ball at the end of that game against Dallas that, cost them the game. And I think Bucky Irving is the future there. So hopefully the coaching staff has probably learned their lesson a bit. They're going to have Bucky Irving in more of those crunch time, big moments. And because he stepped up and played well when he's been put in those positions. So Bucky Irving, he's been very good as it is, while, pretty much in a 50-50 split with Rachaad White. If he can just get a little bit more of that workload, I think he's in line for a huge week against, Carolina's defense, which did just give up a ton of points to James Conner, who only played about 2.5 quarters. So, Bucky Irving certainly in line for another big week at the running back position. And third is going to be a guy that was a first-round pick, a player that was drafted to be great, to be a leader of your team, and he just hasn't really been that for you, and that's Breece Hall. So I want to give you some confidence to start Breece Hall this week. He's at Buffalo, should be a higher scoring game, and I know it's, we say that right after Buffalo was involved in a low-scoring game against New England, but Buffalo's offense has been terrific. The Jets are going to have to score, and Breece Hall, I think, is finally getting back to full health. He's been banged up over the past month or two, but he started to wrestle back more of the workload last week. I think he gets even more this week, and I also would expect him to catch a lot of passes in this game. That's really the main reason he's on this list, because I don't know that he's going to rack up a ton of rushing yards necessarily. I think you're probably in line for a 15 carries for 60-yard type of performance on the ground. But I think we are in a position where we could see Breece Hall, get 8, 9, 10 targets and, add a lot of, passing work. And if he can just get in the end zone for a touchdown, I think he could be in line for a very big week when you factor in, anywhere from 5 to 10 receptions and the yardage that would come with that. So Breece Hall, the third running back on this list. And last but not least, there's a bit of a cop-out because he had a massive week this past week. But again, when you look at, the weekly matchups, there's just not a ton of guys that you feel awesome about that, can have big weeks. So I'm going to go with Jonathan Taylor again. He's at the New York Giants, and we mentioned Anthony Richardson in that matchup, and it's kind of the same type of logic for Jonathan Taylor. He just had a 40-point game, or just about, and the Colts should win this game. They should be able to run the ball, and Jonathan Taylor is going to command essentially all of the backfield work in this game. So it could come down to, does Richardson snipe any, touchdowns from Taylor or vice versa? How does that work? But I think you once again can start both players together. But Taylor in particular should be, right there in line for a huge week. All right, on to the wide receivers, where I'm going to start off with Nico Collins, Houston Texans wide receiver, at home against Baltimore. And this, Baltimore's secondary has been a bit suspect all year, typically, at least for fantasy purposes, because teams have to throw the ball against Baltimore to catch up or stay in games because the Ravens have just gone out to these big leads and whatnot. So it's kind of what you expect. But Nico Collins has been awesome with CJ Stroud this year. He's established himself as the clear number one option. But Tank Dell is out for the season, suffered a very gruesome knee injury. In fact, his entire 2025 season is probably in doubt. So we talked about him a few weeks ago on the Forks in the Road episode where, Tank Dell was really in a position where he needed to, show that he was, a high-end wide receiver 2 for this team, or if he was going to be kind of more of a one-year wonder, fall back to more of just your steady, wide receiver 3, 4 slot type of player. Unfortunately, we didn't really get to see the full picture there, but from a dynasty value perspective, Tank Dell certainly is going to take a huge hit because we probably won't see him again until 2026. So that's unfortunate news. However, for championship week, it just should give you even more confidence to have Nico Collins out there. You're never going to bench him anyways. So this is kind of the more obvious pick of this group. Although all 4 of these guys, frankly, at this point, should be absolute locks in your lineup. But Nico Collins, first guy on this list. Next up is Brian Thomas Jr., the rookie from Jacksonville. He's at home against Tennessee, which on paper is not necessarily the best matchup, but kind of like this past week, I feel like this is something where it's going to be a close game, something that, Jacksonville should be involved. They might have a lead, but it'll be close. They might be coming back. Just a good game. Kind of, the last couple weeks have been like that for Jacksonville, and Brian Thomas Jr. has been outstanding. He's clearly taken, another step forward. I think that he, has certainly overtaken Rome Odunze as the third best receiver from this draft class. And I think there's a pretty solid argument to be made that you would draft Brian Thomas Jr. over Marvin Harrison right now in a startup, which is pretty wild to say from where we were, 3 or 4 months ago. But that's how good Brian Thomas has been. Marvin Harrison has been, a bit mediocre, more average, kind of a wide receiver 3, but Brian Thomas Jr. has been very, very good. So I think you can start him with full confidence. I've no doubt that you probably would have been anyways, given how strong he has been the past couple weeks. But don't be scared of the bad matchup. This is going to be... The Jaguars are not good enough to run away from any teams. So I don't think you need to worry about, game script necessarily for them. In fact, I think playing, other bad teams is probably good for them because it keeps things competitive, but more of a regular game script instead of something where teams can, just set up their defense for the pass and you might get some chunk plays, but they're going to keep you out of the end zone, whatever. So Brian Thomas Jr. start of the week against Tennessee. Next is Terry McLaurin. So this ties in with the Jaden Daniels start of the week. I just think this is a really strong matchup, and I've kind of done this a bit each week so far where I've usually had at least one wide receiver that, matches up with the quarterback. One of the quarterback starts of the week. So I'm doing that again here with McLaurin. And again, we talked about Atlanta and their subpar defense. This game is at home for Washington. It's a big matchup for both teams. And McLaurin has been awesome. He has formed a great connection there with Jaden Daniels, and I fully expect that to continue this week in Week 17. And last but not least, at the wide receiver position, we're going to go with Davante Adams for at least, I think, the second week in a row. And I told you that story how I had meant to put him into the Week 15 starts and changed my mind at the last minute. So Adams has just been really, really involved. He's overtaking Garrett Wilson very clearly as the number one receiver in this offense. And with the team out of the playoff picture, it kind of seems like Aaron Rodgers is just focused on, padding some stats for his boy here in Davante Adams. And, I don't think either one of them has any issue with that. They're at Buffalo, so it's against the team that they're going to have to throw the ball well to, stay competitive. And I think we'll see another touchdown. I think just another big game is, right on deck here for Davante Adams. Moving on over to the tight end position, where, as per usual, it is difficult to find players that just have good matchups that you really like. It's been, a tough year for the position in general. And I'm going to start it off with a guy that's been probably one of the few nice surprises, and that is Jonnu Smith, Miami Dolphins tight end. He's on the road at Cleveland. No Jalen Waddle, potentially. He's been banged up. So I like Jonnu Smith in this game. He's been very, very productive over the second half of the season, and I would fully expect that to continue against, a Cleveland defense that is, it's just okay. They're, trying to keep this team in games. It's been a bit of tough sledding with, DTR last week where their offense just wasn't able to move the ball at all. And then the previous weeks where Jameis Winston was turning the ball over all the time. So you kind of get in these shootouts, your defense is, getting tired out. But it's a good matchup for Miami, a good matchup for Smith, and that's why he is on this list as the first tight end start of the week. Next is Chig Okonkwo, Tennessee Titans tight end, and he really, he was a big name in Dynasty a couple years ago, has had a couple moments here and there, has pretty much fallen off the radar for most of the season, but he had a really nice week last week. He had 11 targets, 9 catches, and it was really his second week in a row that he was very productive for fantasy football. So I think that streak continues. He goes on the road to the Colts. Indianapolis is a good matchup against the tight end position, so I like this spot here. He's clearly been, better with Mason Rudolph, so, we like that matchup here, and that's why Okonkwo is a good start this week at tight end, especially because this is a guy that there's a chance he's on waivers in your league, depending on, the size and whether it's redraft or dynasty. Dynasty, he's probably on a roster, but if your league doesn't have a trading deadline and you really need a starter, you might be able to make something happen. But Jake Okonkwo, somebody that I think you can start with confidence this week. Next up is Dalton Schultz. So Schultz finally had a big game last week for Houston. And again, this is where that Tank Dell injury comes into play. We mentioned Nico Collins. Dalton Schultz should essentially be the de facto number 2 receiver on this team now for the rest of the season. They did just claim Deontay Johnson, but given how much he struggled, I just don't really see that factoring in. In fact, Deontay Johnson is a player that, if he plays at all or people get excited about the possibility of him, joining another team, I would trade him and move on as fast as possible. I don't know what you really could get for him, but if you can get a second round pick, I think you should absolutely trade him. I know when he first, got sent over to Baltimore, when he got sent over to Baltimore, people were, very excited. It was this big, huge thing, and he'd been pretty good with Carolina. And I saw him get traded for a first-round pick in a league. I saw him get traded for a package of seconds. I mean, this is something where you probably missed the boat, but every time there's a new, moment of hope, it presents an opportunity to sell and move on for a player that probably is done. So I would be looking to move on from Deontay Johnson. But anyhow, back to Dalton Schultz. That is why he is the start of the week. Should be the second option. Baltimore, as we mentioned, is a relatively soft pass defense, and it should be a high-scoring game, a huge, playoff preview potentially here. So Dalton Schultz, third tight end, start of the week. Now, there really wasn't anybody that I loved that stood out immediately from combing through, the rosters and the starts for Week 17. So I'm going to go with a player that has been coming on stronger of late. If you have him on your team, he's probably been starting for you most of the year anyways because of his reputation and the fact that you probably didn't have too many other better options. But that's Sam Laporta, Detroit Lions tight end. He's at San Francisco on Monday Night Football. He's been much better as of late. I think without David Montgomery, this team is, going to be looking to spread the ball out a little bit more. And he had a good week this past week against Chicago, and I think that can continue here on the road. So Sam Laporta, I just want to give you some confidence to, start him, keep him in your lineup if you made it this far. I know it's been a bit of an up and down season, obviously not as productive as his rookie season, but I think you can start him again this week, and he will deliver for you. So there you have it. There are the Week 16 starts of the week, and I'll do a quick run through here for all 16 players. At quarterback, Jaden Daniels, Anthony Richardson, Bo Nix, and Baker Mayfield. At running back, Kyron Williams, Bucky Irving, Breece Hall, and Jonathan Taylor. Wide receiver, we're going to go with Nico Collins, Brian Thomas Jr., Terry McLaurin, and Devontae Adams. And then at tight end, we're going to go with Jonnu Smith, Chig Okonkwo, Dalton Schultz, and Sam Laporta. Now, one thing before I sign off here, you've probably noticed that some of these names, especially on today's show, are a bit more kind of obvious starts. We're not going deeper down the barrel here to find, borderline starts, but that's because this is, championship week. If you've made it this far, chances are your lineup decisions are not going to be, should I start Daniel Bellinger at tight end, should I start, insert, wide receiver 5 type of player here. I mean, we're going to be talking about the bigger names, right? And some of these more veteran players or guys like Breece Hall that we mentioned, Bo Nix, who you might have drafted, late in the first round. So these are the types of moves that when you're a championship contender, you're in the finals, you're just not looking at further, matchups further down the list, right? You just want to steer away from those. Obviously, there's going to be injury situations. I had a team that had a bye week and I lost like 3 or 4 players to injury during the bye week, which, made things a little bit tough. But, adapt as best as you can, but rely on your studs. Stick with the guys that got you there. And hopefully you will be celebrating a fantasy football championship a week from today. So thank you all for listening. I appreciate it. It's been a fun season. And, after the regular season ends here, after the holidays, we'll have an episode where I kind of run through some of my big preseason takes. We'll talk about some of the things I got right, some of the things I got wrong, and give you kind of an outline for our off-season schedule, because that's where I really think that this podcast thrives and can really help you the most, is going to be, in the off-season months, particularly from January through May into June, where we get into the rookies. We'll have a 2025 rookie preview coming in the next few weeks or so. We'll have that sometime in January. And, if you're into startups, we'll have some startup talk. And then we're going to get all into the rookies and kind of break those players down as we lead up to the NFL draft. So stay tuned for all of that. Make sure you're following the show. And we will talk to you all in the next episode. Thank you all so much, and have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and happy rest of the holiday season, and we will talk to you all soon. Thanks so much.